Injustice, I thought, was a really interesting premise for a show. We all know how many cop shows there are on the air and law shows, and most of those are essentially about finding the bad guy, the guy who did it, or the woman who did it, and putting that person away. And justice is served, and we all sleep a little safer. Well, this was a show about what if the bad guy that we found wasn't actually the bad guy, that actually he was completely innocent. And in fact, the bad guy could even still be out there walking the streets. That to me was a really interesting distinction, and something that I thought could make for a really interesting series. I wasn't the only one. Obviously the network and the writers and producers, Stu Bloomberg, Robert King and Michelle King. Robert King and Michelle King obviously went on to create and write The Good Wife, and they've done extremely well on that series. Robert King and I, by the way, still email each other, and Kyle and I are still friends. So we still discuss Injustice, and we still discuss would we have done anything different, and what if it had gone on longer, all that kind of stuff. So Injustice obviously asks a lot of questions about the judicial system we have now, and again, not entirely critical of the system itself, but more spending time on the human element. It's a system that is right 99% of the time, which is an extremely high rate of success. But what happens to that 1%? Who is that person or people? What happens to them while they're serving their time? What happens to them? How do they get out? How do they end up being exonerated? And how are they able to sort of try to put their lives together after that happens? It was also loosely based and inspired by the Real Life Innocence Project, headed up by Barry Scheck. So obviously that was a well that we were tapping, and those stories are still coming out in the press all the time. Another prisoner has been exonerated because they didn't do what it was they were accused of, and I'm still astounded how often that seems to happen. The idea behind the show was that Kyle MacLachlan's character David Swain was sort of bankrolling this project in order to exonerate people for crimes they hadn't committed, and had hired for not much money a bunch of recent law graduates and an ex-cop by the name of Charles Conti, who I played. And with that team, they would go about their business of finding cases, choosing cases, and then seeing if there was anything in that case to explore, and whether they would actually go ahead and try to exonerate that person in question. And obviously there was a different case every week. What we sort of discovered later was that David Swain wasn't always doing this just from the love of his heart. He was doing it for political ends. It made him look like a really good guy. And that was the fun that Kyle was able to have that with that character. And my character was slightly more driven, slightly more serious, and kept reminding everybody of the stakes. The episode of Injustice I liked most, or at least the episode that I think we really achieved what we set out to achieve, from my point of view, was the episode called The Public Burning, where a man ends up actually, we fail to exonerate him, and he does actually end up being executed. So it was something that a lot of people were asking whether we would do in the series, whether we would actually fail to get that person free, and whether a sentence like that would actually stand. And I thought because of that it was extremely powerful. And I think anybody who's actually sat through that episode, if they don't come out with a tear rolling down their cheek, there's something seriously wrong with them, and I suggest they get help.